Welcome to the Knowledge Seeker channel. The channel is dedicated to exploring critical issues in the world. As such, this channel is not afraid to challenge existing facts, beliefs, and practices in order to contribute to the advancement of knowledge in the world. The title of this presentation is Orukarism is higher in spiritual consciousness than the globalized religions. So are other African religions. The purpose of this presentation is to show or demonstrate that Orukarism, like other ancient African religions, have a higher level of spiritual consciousness than the globalized religions. In order to accomplish the goals of the presentation, the following arguments are made. 1. Orukarism is higher in spiritual consciousness than the globalized religions because it is a product of universal consciousness. And 2. The globalized religions, including Buddhism, Christianity, Confucianism, Islam, Judaism, Sikhism, Zoroastrianism, and so forth, are highly intellectualized religions based on reason and logic and not necessarily on faith. Now, what is Orukarism? Orukarism is the religion of the Ezon people of the Niger Delta. Orukarism is derived from Orukare. Orukare means to worship a deity. Deity connotes God and other deities that make up the godly realm. Thus, Orukarism is the totality of the principles, beliefs, norms, values, and practices which constitute the Orukare religion. Orukarism is a product of the universal consciousness. The Supreme God is the embodiment of the supreme invisible consciousness and the formless energy, Mara. This is the sacred temple of the Most High God Mothers. This is an Orukare religious center. These are traditional Ijaw leaders who visited the Agadagba Bo sacred place. And you can see they are all appearing white to signify cleanliness, spiritual purity. What is universal consciousness? It is a philosophical and spiritual concept which emphasizes that the world is characterized by a singular force or entity which connects all living things in an unchanging reality. Hence, individual thoughts are singularized expressions of the same consciousness. In other words, the world is interconnected and all the living things, all the organisms are all interconnected to the heavenly creator. Thus, Orukarism emanates from this consciousness. This is why it is referred to as a natural or pure religion, since it cannot be manipulated to serve selfish purposes which are contrary to the laws of the cosmos. Why Orukarism has a spiritual consciousness than the global religions? Indeed, Orukarism is a product of universal consciousness, as stated earlier. It emanates from the divine creator, which is the supreme intelligence or supreme being or God. As such, it evolves as part of the natural manifestation of the universe. It is guided by the rules of nature, which are also the rules of the universal consciousness. Why? Because nature is a product of God and is guided by rules set by the universal consciousness or universal intelligence. Since it is a manifestation of universal consciousness, it is based on absolute truth. Thus, an Orukarist, that is somebody who subscribes to Urukari religion, cannot lie or tell tall tales, since truthfulness is equated with godliness. Consequently, to be godly is to be truthful. He or she who cannot tell the truth cannot be godly in Urukarism. Hypocrisy, pretentiousness, and acting to create a false image or impression is not acceptable. Orukarism abhors egoistic and materialistic tendencies and greediness. Now, let's see being one with the divine being. Since Orukarism is a product of universal consciousness, people are required to always identify with the divine essence in order to be successful in various aspects of life. Why? Because the major cardinal spiritual virtues of Orukarism are truth, justice, balance, order, harmony, humility, and morality. This is why the Ijos always extol their members to live according to these virtues in order to receive the blessings of God, deities, and the ancestors. So, Ijo culture is very spiritual. It is the need to be in consonance with truth, justice, balance, order, harmony, humility, and morality that makes Ijo culture to be spiritual. In other words, Ijo culture is very spiritual, and the members must always strive to live their lives in accordance with these virtues. This means the following. A. Truth. Orukarism demands absolute truthfulness due to the belief that to be truthful is to be godly. B. Justice. Every Ijaw person must strive to be fair and judicious, since injustice is tantamount to ungodliness. This is why an Ijaw person cannot cheat or engage in an unjust war. C. Balanced. Every Ijaw person is expected to live a balanced life. This means not engaging in excesses like overeating or overdrinking or overpartying or oversexing or being greedy and wanting to own everything in the world. The belief is that he or she who lives a balanced life is more likely to be happier and godlier than someone who engages in excesses. This also means avoiding addictive behaviors like taking drugs or mind-altering substances or being so driven to acquire wealth or power to the extent of violating other people's rights. D. Order. Maintaining order is very important in Orukare religion. Order comes in the form of being clean and tidy, obeying rules and laws, being respectful of parents and elders, and avoiding lawlessness, not violating the taboos or sacred commandments, avoiding disruptive and chaotic behavior, and having regard for others and other creatures in the universe. E. Harmony. Like order, Urukare emphasizes harmony, meaning that people must live in harmony and not be disruptive. That is, have respect for law and the community, support the family and the community, not be greedy and materialistic to the point of causing disharmony in society. F. Humility. Godliness requires a high degree of humility. Humility requires being humble, avoid being egoistic and arrogant. It means to control one's emotions. Humility is very critical in a just spiritual culture. He or she who is not humble cannot be godly. To be spiritually conscious is to be humble. G. Morality. This requires every Ijaw person to subscribe to the moral order of society. This means not violating the abominations or engaging in sacrilegious acts. Anyone who violates the moral order must confess the deed and do penance. It is very important to know the do's and don'ts of Ijaw land, as well as those of the sub-ethnic groups. Thus, a Kolokuma person must adhere to the moral requirements of the Kolokuma clan, as well as that of the Ijaw nation. An Ogbia person must understand the moral order of your Ogbia society. And a Piatisa person must understand the moral rules and follow them accordingly. A Buseni person must follow the moral rules pertaining to the Buseni nation. A Boni or Ibani person must follow the moral rules pertaining to the Ibani nation. This applies to every Ijaw person, regardless of whether you are from Akasa or Tarakri or Egbema or Baramatu or Okreka or Maine or Kalabare, and so on and so forth. Thus, an Ijaw person cannot follow members of other ethnic groups to engage in ritualistic killings or cult activities intended to kill or harm or block the success of others. Anyone who tries to prevent someone from succeeding or achieving a goal is considered to have committed an abomination and renders himself or herself impure. Thus, Ijaw politicians must be very careful before joining members of other groups to engage in diabolical acts to win elections or remain in power. Why? Because Ijaw spiritual culture does not tolerate straying from the path of the universal consciousness. Now, it should be noted that Orukarism also subscribes to the 7 deadly sins as in Christianity and in Islam. The 7 spiritual virtues in Orukarism matches the 7 deadly sins. The 7 deadly sins are: 1. Pride, which deals with ego and arrogance. 2. Envy. Orukarism frowns at envy since it leads to the committing of a sin by hating and blocking someone else's path. Envy is a negative energy. 3. Anger, wrath. It is also a negative energy because anger can lead to the commission of evil act against another person. Uncontrollable anger cannot lead to godliness. 4. Sloth. Laziness is considered a sin because it leads to temptations and a desire to commit sins. 5. Greed. Greed is a deadly sin. In fact, in Ijaw land today, greed has taken over the lives of many people, especially some politicians and public officials who want to accumulate so much wealth through pilfering of public funds without caring about others in society. In the past, where Orukarism reigned, sharing was a common facet of Ijaw culture. Today, greed is taking over and it is increasingly me, me, and me. 6. Gluttony. That is overindulgence. This sin contributes to greed and selfishness. It is increasingly affecting Ijaw land as individualism, envy, and greed takes over. Ijaw culture is based on sharing. Gluttony can lead to physical and psychological ailments, especially when somebody overeats, overengages in any activity to the point of causing negative results. And 7, lust. Lust leads to overindulgence and greed. So you can see these 7 deadly sins are somehow interrelated. And these are some of the major points an individual can use to decide whether he or she is godly or not, regardless of whether you go to church every morning, you go to the shrine every morning, you go to the mosque every Friday. It does not matter if you violate one of these 7 deadly sins. Now, the question is, why Orukarism has a higher spiritual consciousness than the global religions? And the question is why? Why do I think? Why does anybody think that Orukarism has a higher spiritual consciousness than Christianity or Islam or Judaism or Buddhism? As indicated above, Ijaw culture is very spiritual, and members of the ethnic group are expected to subscribe to spiritual rules that anchors them in the realm of the universal consciousness. Due to the spirituality of Ijaw culture, there are several sacred towns and places throughout Ijaw society. For instance, there is Oruamabere, which is a very sacred town in Nembe clan or sub-ethnic group. Kalama is a sacred town in Kulukuma clan or sub-ethnic group. Please follow me as I identify the reasons for the high spirituality of Orukarism. So I'm going to go identify them one by one. 1. Orukarism is a product of universal consciousness. This is very important. This means that it manifests from nature and is based on the rules of nature, which are also the laws of God. Because it manifests from the universe, it cannot be manipulated to achieve selfish or inhuman ends. Thus, it is sinful to prepare and invoke deities to cause harm because of envy or jealousy or anger, except as a means of defending oneself from harm or evil or danger. In other words, you can only invoke the deities in Orukarism to harm someone if the person is about to kill you or harm you or destroy you. Then in that case, you can invoke the deities to protect you by neutralizing the person. That is the only time you can do that. The deities can only be preyed upon and invoked to prevent or destroy evil intentions. 2. Unlike the globalized religions, that is Orukarism, does not require reading a book to know God. Orukarism, like many ancient African religions, could be considered as a pure or natural religion in the world. Why? And there are many reasons. I regard it as a pure or natural religion because A, you do not need to read a particular book to know God. In Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, and so forth, you need to read books which are regarded as sacred texts to know God. B. In Orukarism, God only manifests to those who are spiritually clean. C. God manifests to those who have good intentions. Three, in Orukarism, God is ever present. On the other hand, in Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, God is viewed in the past. Why? Because to be a Christian, it is necessary to read the Bible to know God. The Bible was written about 2,000 years ago. So, God is fixed in the past as far as Christianity and the Bible are concerned. In Islam, it is necessary to read the Koran to know Allah. The Koran was written about 1500 years ago. Therefore, to know Allah, it is necessary to go back 1500 years. This puts God in the past and not in the present. The same applies to Judaism, since the Torah was written about 2000 or more years in the past. In Orukarism, God is omnipresent and ever present. You do not need to go back 1,000 years to know God, because God manifests every second and every minute of the day. That is a very big difference between Orukarism and the globalized religions. If you are a Christian, you have to read the Bible, you have to listen to your pastor, and your pastor is going to tell you how God was, what happened 2,000 or more years back. Not in the present. The same thing in Islam. This is Akaso shrine in Kalabari. Akaso is the major sub-ethnic deity of the Kalabari people of Ijoland. And this is a statute. 4. Relying on a book to know God, Allah, leads to ideological rigidity. Anything written in a book is fixed in time. Rigidity does not allow for innovative thought. This is why Christians insist that the only way to worship God is through Christianity and follow the teachings of Jesus Christ as written in the Bible 2,000 years ago. This also contributes to why Muslims insist that to know Allah, it is necessary to read the Koran. Thus, the individual cannot waver and must sheepishly follow the book. There is no tolerance for other religious points of view because the sacred books are fixed in their views. It is like putting something in a box. You always have to go to that box to know what God is, how to get to God. 5. The Bible and the Quran have contributed immensely toward violence and deaths of people. The Bible and the Quran have sections that describe what individuals need to do to go to heaven and visit with God or Allah. The same Bible and Quran also have sections that deal with how to rape, kill, enslave, and destroy. This is why millions of people have been killed and societies have been destroyed, because the perpetrators believe that they were doing the right thing because the Bible and or the Quran tell them to do so. Orukarism does not follow any book. It follows the sacred laws of nature as determined by the universal consciousness. 6. Since Orukarism manifests from the universe, there is no single founder. Orukarism is a product of natural, universal manifestations. As such, it is not associated with a single philosophical or theological or religious founder. Buddhism, Christianity, Confucianism, Islam, Judaism, Sikhism, Zoroastrianism, and so forth are associated with individual founders. For instance, A. Buddhism is associated with Buddha as the founder. B. Christianity is associated with Jesus Christ. C. Confucianism is associated with Confucius. D. Islam is associated with Prophet Muhammad. E. Judaism is associated with Abraham as the spiritual father. F. Sikhism was founded by Guru Nanak. G. Zoroastrianism is associated with Prophet Zarathustra, Spitama. Because these globalized religions are associated with individuals, it is essential to believe and adopt the teachings or philosophical orientations of the founders to know God or seek salvation. Thus, the leaders of these religions enforce the doctrinal teachings of their founders. So here you have on the left Jesus Christ, which is associated with Christianity. On the right, you have the image of Buddha. Buddhism is associated with him or her. In other words, he is the founder of Buddhism. On the left, you have Zarathustra, the founder of Zoroastrianism. And on the right, you have Confucius, the originator of Confucianism. So, whichever of these globalized religions you belong to, you must closely follow the writings and teachings of the founders in order to know God and to go to God or to achieve nirvana. Hence, to achieve nirvana, it is necessary to follow the teachings of Buddha. To be a Christian, it is necessary to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. To be a Confucian, it is necessary to follow the teachings of Confucius. To be a Muslim, it is necessary to follow the teachings of Prophet Muhammad. To be a Jew, it is necessary to follow the traditions of Abraham and Moses. To be a Sikhist, it is necessary to follow the teachings of Guru Nanak. To be a Zoroastrian, it is necessary to follow the teachings of Prophet Zarathustra. Note, these founders are so revered that they are treated as God by some followers. The adherents spend all their time emulating the life of their religious founders. In Orukarism, there is not a single founder because it manifests as part of nature's consciousness. It manifests from different aspects of the cosmos. 7. The organized, globalized religions are rationalized religions, while Orukarism is not. Although Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, Judaists, Sikhists, and so forth are likely to argue that their religions are based on faith. The fact is that these religions are highly rationalized, based on reason and logic. This is why these religions have intellectuals who serve as monks, theologians, clerics, and religious scholars who argue and write regularly to justify the tenets of their religions. These intellectuals are responsible for rationalizing that the path to God is to follow the teachings of their founders, since they are connected to God. So these are intellectualized religions. They are not based on faith. You have to reason and use the logic of the argument of the religion in order to believe in them. For instance, even though it is a fact that human beings have been worshipping God in various ways since their creation. Christians maintain that the only way to truly worship God is through Christianity. The implication is that anyone who does not worship God through Christianity is not godly. You see the problem? And Christianity is only about 2,000 years old. This rationalized argument does not consider the fact that it is God or nature that made it possible for humans to speak and have thousands of languages, cultures, and religions. Yet, Christians maintain that the only way to know God is through Christianity. If Christianity is the only way, why are there thousands of languages and cultures in the world? Likewise, even though it is a fact that human beings have been worshipping God in various ways since their creation, Muslims maintain that the only way to truly worship God is through Islam. The implication is that anyone who does not worship Allah through Islam is not godly. This rationalized argument does not consider the fact that it is God or nature that made it possible for humans to speak thousands of languages and have cultures and religions. Yet, Muslims maintain that the only way to know Allah is through Islam. Of course, Allah existed before Islam. The Arabs have been using the word Allah to refer to God thousands of years, even before the creation of Islam. Additionally, it is necessary to stick to reading the approved sacred texts that are associated with the religion to know and follow God or Allah and so forth. Orukarism is not a rationalized religion that emanates from the philosophical and intellectual efforts of individuals. This is why it cannot be manipulated. You see, the globalized religions can easily be manipulated because they are highly intellectualized. The rationalized religions are easily manipulated to serve individuals, institutions, and states. The history of the world is filled with occasions in which the organized religions have been manipulated to serve political, economic, and financial interests in the world. Please look at these two personalities. The one on the left is Saint Augustine of Hippo. Many Christians are not aware that it was Saint Augustine who wrote extensively to defend Christianity when the Western Roman Empire collapsed and the Romans were blaming the Christians for the downfall of the empire. And he wrote to justify why Christianity should be adopted, because it was the only way for the empire to embrace God. So among the Christian intellectuals, he is one of the pillars of the Christian religion. On the right, you have Imam al-Bukhari, a major Islamic scholar and writer. He contributed to writing some of the Islamic tenets. So when you talk about Islam, you cannot Ibn al-Bukhari. He is even considered to have contributed in compiling the Koran. He is a major Islamic scholar. 8. It is necessary to be literate to know God in the globalized religions. Whether it is Buddhism, Christianity, Confucianism, Islam, Judaism, Sikhism, Zoroastrianism, and so forth, it is necessary to be literate in order to know God or Allah. Why? Because it is important to be able to read the sacred books in order to know God or Allah and how to get to God, Allah, or achieve nirvana in Buddhism. Anyone who cannot read must rely on someone else to explain to him or her what the book says. So if you are a Christian, you cannot read, then you must rely on somebody else explaining to you what the Bible says in order for you to know God. If you are a Muslim, you can't read and write, then you must listen to somebody who understands, who can read and write to explain to you what the Quran says. Otherwise, you won't know God, you can't go to God. In Orukarism, God manifests to anyone as far as the person is clean. Literacy is not necessary to experience godly manifestations. Indeed, you do not need to read and write to know God. 9. Through Orukarism, the truth of any matter can be verified through divination. Since Orukarism is a product of universal consciousness, information can be obtained spiritually through divination. And it can be used in various ways. A, it can be used to determine paternity of a child. In fact, the Ijaws for centuries did not rely on blood tests or DNA to know whether a child belongs to the family or not. They use divination to do that. B, to determine the cause of death of any individual. In other words, in Ijaw land, if anybody dies and there is suspicion about the death, they can conduct divination to find out the cause of death. You see, divination can also be used to find out the motive of a stranger. In other words, if a stranger visits an Ijaw community and the Ijaws do not know why he or she is there, they can use divination to find out the motive of his visitation. Divination can be used to determine whether a person is lying or not. So there are many ways Ijaws can find out information beyond the scientific method of inquiry. Most times, Ijaws would conduct divination to find out whether they should go to war or not. Similarly, they can use it to determine whether if they go to war, they will win or not. So the Ijaws again goes beyond the scientific way of thinking to get information through contact with the Akashic record to find information. So apart from using divination, the Ijaws can also visit the shrines of the deities, and through the services of the priests and the priestesses, they can get information from other entities. Again, they just have so many ways to gather information from the universe. The organized, globalized religions cannot achieve such feats. Only highly devoted members of these religions, especially in Buddhism, Hinduism, Kabbalistic Judaism, and so forth, can experience spiritual manifestations. Some Christian monks can achieve such spiritual feats. It should be noted that the late Padre Pio received the gift of stigmata, hence his hands and feet used to bleed like that of Jesus Christ while he was alive. In Christendom, I think it's only him and maybe Francis Assisi that achieve such a feat, the idea of receiving the gift of Jesus Christ in the form of the hands and the feet bleeding. In Orukarism, spiritual possession can take place easily if the individual is attuned to the universal consciousness. 10. Due to high spiritual level of Orukarism, religious priests and priestesses are chosen by godly entities. In the globalized, organized religions, anyone can decide to become a religious priest. The individual simply applies to a theological school for admission or a religious temple. As soon as the person is admitted, the individual then completes a course of study to become a religious priest or a monk. After graduation, the person applies to serve in a church or a mosque or a temple. Quite often, the sincerity of the individual cannot be determined. In Orukarism, an individual cannot just walk into a shrine and plead to serve as a religious priest or priestess. No, you can't do that. The individual is often chosen by a conscious entity. When an individual has been chosen, the person is going to experience miraculous occurrences and engage in time travel kind of dreams that require explanations. Eventually, the individual will come to realize that he or she has been chosen to serve as a priest or a priestess. If, after having been chosen, if any individual does not want to serve, the person must perform certain rituals to excuse himself or herself from serving as a priest or priestess. In other words, if you have been chosen and you do not want to serve, then you must perform a certain ritual to plead with the spiritual entity that you are not ready to serve. You cannot just walk away because there are spiritual consequences if you simply walk away after having been chosen. Here you have an Urukari priestess performing a religious service in Ijoland. In Oprosa, in Baramatu Kingdom. Orukarism is so sacred to the extent that no individual will fake to be an Urukari religious priest or priestess unless the person wants to invite spiritual trouble onto himself or herself. On the other hand, because the globalized religions are rationalized institutions, there are many pastors, imams, and monks who deceive people. And there are those who are faking it in order to achieve other ends. Urukari priests and priestesses are very humble, so much so that it is sometimes difficult to know who they are. The pantheon in Orukarism. Let's use a pyramid to describe it. At the top is God. God, the supreme being or supreme intelligence, is followed by the national Ijo gods, which serve as cabinet ministers or angels or functional subsets of God. And there are about 10 of them. Then you have the senior deities associated with the clans or sub-ethnic groups, followed by the lesser deities associated with the clans or sub-ethnic groups. So each Ijo's clan or sub-ethnic group has its major deities as well as the lesser deities. Then you have the gods and goddesses that are associated with the towns and villages. Those are followed by the gods and goddesses associated with the families. So there are some families that have this special spiritual gift that are associated with certain deities. Then at the very bottom, you have deities that are associated with individuals. Of all this, the supreme intelligence or God is the most important. Then you might as even had the ancestors at the very bottom. "11. The deities, angels that serve as the guardians of the universe. In Orukarism, after God, you have the national gods. And these national gods operate like functional sections of God or angels. And there are one, Adamu or Eseru. Adamu functions as God's spiritual presence in the human self. This is represented symbolically by the python or boa constrictor. And that's why many parts of Ijoland, like you go to Nimbe, Boni, Bile, the python is considered a sacred animal because it represents God in human form. Then you have 2, Amakiri or Kirogbo, the godly essence that is responsible for regulating the physical world, earthly laws, and living. So these are universal deities. Then you have Are or Seke, the godly manifestation that is responsible for differentiating things into various categories. 4, you have the Ayibara or Ayiba or Oginaro, the component of God that is responsible for divine law and the order of the universe. So this is again God. Then you have Benikurukuru or Sokare. Here, God manifests as the supreme spiritual power. 6, you have Egbesu or Ogbosu or Akoru or Agadagba Oru. This deity or cosmic being is responsible for enforcing the divine laws and maintaining the natural order of things in the universe. It is responsible for fighting evil and injustice and protecting the righteous. So if you are a Ijaw person, please, if somebody is trying to take your land and you know that land belongs to you, invoke Egbesu. In fact, I will advise any Ijaw community, any Ijaw individual, you already have spiritual gifts that can assist you to achieve your rights. 7, Kalasuo or Kalasuoru, the godly manifestation that is responsible for coordinating the universe. 8. Uruamena, the godly manifestation that provides spiritual energy for all things to materialize. 9. Tao or Tao 2, the deity that is associated with the godly manifestation of supreme knowledge or conscience. This is equivalent to the Egyptian Thoth, god of knowledge. And 10. Wonyinge Tamarau, the supreme mother goddess and father god, the manifestation of the creative source of all things. So you see, these angelic entities makes Orukarism very, very spiritual. They are not human beings that turn into gods. These are part of the universal consciousness or part of the supreme intelligence complex. Here you have a traditional religious shrine named Nembe Pere Ogilolo in Uruamabiri. Uruamabiri means what? The quarter or section devoted to the deities. So it's a sacred place in Nembe. Twelve, world civilization began in Africa. Thus, Africa is the foundation for the initiation of civilization, religion, spirituality, and the moral ethics of existence. This is why the Egyptian mystery schools taught academic and spiritual courses. Those who graduated from the Egyptian mystery schools developed high levels of academic and spiritual proficiency. Many Greek scholars, as you can see them, so many of the ancient Greek scholars attended the Egyptian mystery schools, including some of their best mathematicians, their best scientists, all attended school in Egypt. The ancient Egyptian mystery schools were first established by Thoth, the Egyptian god of knowledge, wisdom, writing, magic, moon, and so forth, who is known in Greece as Hermes. Jesus Christ too is reported to have attended the Egyptian mystery school from age 12 in Heliopolis, where he learned the esoteric teachings and initiation rituals. The ancient mystery schools too have initiation rituals, just as in Orukarism. Many of the ancient stories about religions come from African religious traditions, in which Orukarism is part of. 13. Most parts of the Middle East and Europe were peopled by black African people until 3,000 years ago. It should be noted that a DNA study has revealed that most parts of Europe were inhabited by dark-skinned people until about 3,000 years ago, when climatic conditions led to the changing of skin color. Daniel Radley wrote, and I quote, "Dark-skinned people was widespread across the continent for a considerably longer period than previously believed," according to a DNA study that has completely changed our perception of the appearance of ancient Europeans. In the study, 348 ancient human genomes from people who lived between 45,000 and 1,700 years ago were examined by a team of researchers at the University of Ferrara in Italy. According to the results, pale skin did not become prevalent until about 3,000 years ago. And I unquote, what it says is that until or before 3,000 years ago, people who live in Europe were dark-skinned people. People who moved from Africa to Europe. So basically, the Middle East, Europe were all people by dark-skinned people. So you can see why it is Africa that laid the foundation for civilization. Africa lays the foundation for religion, and so on and so forth. It is the case that there were black people in Britain and Europe going back 22,000 to 33,000 years ago. Archaeologists found in Kent's cavern evidence of black Ice Age Europeans. So what does that mean? That means that in the past, the Europeans were black people. There is a school of thought which claimed that ancient Chinese originated from East Africans. This revelation originated from a DNA study which showed that, and I quote, the 65 branches of the Chinese race share similar DNA mutations with the people of East and Southeast Asia and have originated out of Africa. And I unquote. In fact, the indigenous religions of the Chinese, Koreans, and Japanese are similar to traditional African religions, which Orukarism is part of. So let's look at some ideas and practices borrowed from Urukari and other African religions. So when you look at the globalized religions, things like concepts like sacred places, religious rituals, the concept of God, to sacrifice for God, prayer to God, the concept of spiritual authority, and ancestral sanctification, all these ideas that have been globalized originated from traditional African religions and were incorporated into Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and other religions of the world. 15. Traditional indigenous religions in Asia and Native America are like African religions. Any Ijaw person who is familiar with Orukarism can easily understand traditional Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and Native American indigenous religions. The concepts and practices are similar, although there might be some differences in the practices and in some of the belief systems, but the concepts are very, very similar. Hence, the shaman in traditional Chinese, Mongolian, Korean, and Native American religions play similar roles like Urukare religious priests and priestesses in Ijaw land. The only difference is that they call them shaman, while in Ijaw land we call them religious priests, but they perform the same services. 16. African religious cultures laid the foundation for the emergence of the globalized religions. It is a historical fact that the Greeks and Romans borrowed many of their religious practices from ancient Egypt. The Romans adopted the following Egyptian deities: A. Isis, the goddess of motherhood, magic, and healing. B. Serapis, a syncretic god which fuses Egyptian and Greco-Roman deities. C. Osiris, the god of the underworld and related to the sun god. D. Anubis, the god of funerary rites, mummification, and guide to the underworld. E. Thoth, the Egyptian god of knowledge, wisdom, is responsible for the 42 sacred books containing all the world's knowledge. And F. Orukarism and ancient Egyptian religions share some commonalities. Although Indians are very conscious of being light-skinned due to the caste system in Hindu religion, nevertheless, most of their major deities are portrayed in dark or black or dark blue color, not white. So while Indians might claim they are Aryans, they are light skin, their major deities always appear in dark or black or dark blue color. And some of the Hindu deities that appear in black or dark blue color are A. Sri Rama, B. Krishna, C. Vishnu, and D. Shiva. So you have Indians who always identify with the Aryan race, and yet they have deities that have dark or black or dark blue color. (17) The 10 Commandments in the Bible originated from the 42 declarations or negative confessions in the Book of the Dead. Orukarism too is based on the 42 declarations, like Christianity, Judaism, and possibly Islam. The 42 declarations were the core part of the ancient Egyptian and many African religions, including Orukarism. Orukarism demands spiritual cleanliness, which means that each individual must vow not to commit an evil act. Hence, in many parts of Ijoland, the Maat is performed through divination to find out whether an individual was spiritually clean or not when he or she passed away. In ancient Egypt, in the Book of the Dead, the Maat was performed symbolically by weighing the heart of the dead person against the weight of the feather. If the weight of the heart was equal or less than the weight of the feather, the individual was considered spiritually clean. If the weight of the heart was heavier than the weight of the feather, the person was considered spiritually unclean. 18. Other Christian and Judaist rituals. And there are many rituals that were copied from traditional African religions, but a few will do here. A. The cross is a pre-Christian artifact. The ancient Egyptians, Chaldeans, Sumerians, Indians, and so forth used it before Christianity. B. The Trinity originated from ancient Egypt and Sumeria. C. The religious services in Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and so forth are copied from ancient African religious rituals. The Greeks and Romans incorporated them into their religions, and Christianity borrowed from the Romans and Jews. The Islamic Allah is copied from pre-Islamic Arab religion. In other words, the concept of the word Allah existed thousands of years before Islam came into being. Here you have the ancient Egyptian cross and the Christian cross. So even before, see, 3000 BC, the Egyptians were already using a cross before the Christians adopted it in the common era. You see? And the Indians too have used the cross. The Sumerians have used the cross. Even some Native American ethnic groups too have used the cross thousands of years before the Christians adopted the cross as a symbol. Conclusion to the presentation. Based on the points enunciated above, it is clear that Orukarism and other African religions have a higher level of spiritual consciousness than the globalized religions. The globalized religions are highly intellectualized, hence require the ability to read, to understand God and worship God. Orukarism does not need a book to know God and experience godly manifestations. The globalized religions are identified with individuals as founders, while Orukarism is a product of universal consciousness. Orukarism and other African religions laid the foundations for the emergence of the globalized religions. Thank you for listening to this presentation. Please subscribe to the channel and listen to many other interesting presentations on the Knowledge Seeker channel. Again, thank you. Do not fail to subscribe to the channel.